He replaced me with his cousin and called it efficiency. I didn't expect Bryce to look me in the eyes when he fired me, but I didn't expect him to smirk either, like cutting me loose was some clever move he could brag about later. One minute, I was leading our entire certification pipeline. The next, I was being told that family loyalty mattered more than 5 years of keeping his company afloat. I walked out stunned, angry, and honestly a little ashamed. But there was one thing Bryce never bothered to learn about me. I don't disappear quietly, and the storm heading his way had already started forming. If this hits home, subscribe, and tell me in the comments if you've ever been replaced by someone who didn't deserve the seat. I stood at the far edge of the executive floor, pretending to review a shipment schedule, while Bryce held court in the center of the room, like a man who believed the world spun because he told it to. It was October 12th, the day he'd chosen for what he called a victory toast, even though the only people who did any actual work weren't invited to speak. The investors were flying in next week, and Bryce loved these warm-up performances, loved the spotlight, the noise, the performance of leadership. He lifted his glass, some imported bottle he insisted the company pay for, and bragged about how Helios Meridian was finally running lean, and how the new restructuring freed up capital wasted on unnecessary overhead. I didn't react, but my stomach tightened because we all knew what overhead meant. Jobs, roles that didn't look glamorous on a quarterly report, but kept the machinery from grinding into dust. And yes, mine was one of those roles. I opened my tablet to check a routine shipment tracking document, and that was when the reminder popped up. SATA renewal deadline, October 24th, 12 days. The thought hit so sharply I felt a pulse in my throat. For 5 years, I handled every step of that renewal. Certifications, updated safety standards, plant documentation, chain of custody records for every product entering or leaving Southeast Asia. Hundreds of pages, dozens of cross-checks. No one else at the company even knew where to begin. Bryce didn't understand any of it. Evan certainly didn't. I'd watched him spend 2 weeks trying to pronounce the name of our main certification authority, but I kept my face neutral, because you don't survive 5 years under Bryce Langford without learning how to hide the part of you that wants to scream. He ended his toast with something about innovation and bold new directions, and the room clapped like they were paid to perform applause. Maybe they were. This was the executive floor. People kept their jobs through praise, not performance. Bryce caught my eye across the room, just a glance, but it was enough. He didn't smile, didn't wave, just a quick flick of recognition, like noticing a janitor in the middle of a banquet hall. Returned to my screen, pretending the reminder didn't burn its way into my thoughts. 12 days. I had planned to complete the renewal next week, but everything was already prepared. All the documents were updated. Every compliance record matched the newest manufacturing specs. I had even color-coded the internal references so the submission would take minutes instead of hours. Easy, if I was still the person submitting. A sudden laugh burst from the group near Bryce, loud enough to make several people turn. He thrived on that laugh, the kind that rewarded whoever fed his ego best. But today, the sound scraped across my nerves. Something felt off. Maybe it was the way Tara, his assistant, kept glancing in my direction with a look she quickly masked each time I caught her. Maybe it was the way Bryce's smile never quite reached his eyes during the toast, as if he was holding on to a secret he couldn't wait to drop. Or maybe it was simple intuition, the kind you develop after watching a man cut people loose without blinking. When the celebration finally died down and people drifted back to their offices, I stayed where I was, pretending to type. My heart had already shifted into that quiet, braced stillness you feel right before a storm hits. Something was coming. I didn't know how bad it would be yet, but I knew enough to keep my expression calm, my breathing steady, and my tablet open. Because the moment Bryce turned and said my name, everything I'd built in 5 years was about to be tested. He didn't call me into his office right away. Bryce had a flair for timing, the kind that made people wait just long enough to feel uneasy. I had returned to my desk after the celebration, trying to focus on clearing my inbox, when I saw his shadow stretch across my monitor. "Oakley," he said, not bothering with a greeting. "My office, now." There was no tone, no expression, just that clipped command he used when he wanted to remind people who held the power. I stood, smoothing the front of my blazer, pretending my pulse wasn't pounding behind my ribs. The walk to his glass-walled office wasn't long, but it felt like crossing a stage where everyone pretended not to stare. Tara shot me a look, subtle, quick, but unmistakably troubled. That was the moment I knew. I stepped inside. Bryce closed the door behind me with the soft, deliberate push of someone sealing off a scene. "Stand," he said, sinking into his chair without offering me one. I stayed where I was, hands loosely clasped so he wouldn't see them shake. He studied me like he was trying to decide which script to deliver. Then he steepled his fingers, a habit he loved because he thought it made him look authoritative, and said, "This isn't working out." Just like that. 5 years condensed into 4 indifferent words. I waited for him to elaborate. He didn't rush. He let the silence harden around us before continuing. "We're restructuring," he said, as if this was news. "Cutting down on roles that aren't essential, simplifying." There were 100 ways to politely fire someone. Bryce didn't use any of them. "Your position has been eliminated, effective immediately," he said. "We need people who can keep up with the pace we're moving at." I swallowed the sting. "I see." He nodded, pleased with my quietness, as if it meant I understood his brilliance. "Evan will be absorbing your responsibilities," he added. "He's a good learner, sharp instincts, already picked things up just by shadowing you." It took everything in me not to laugh. Evan? The same man who asked if filing deadlines were flexible depending on mood? But I didn't react. Bryce liked reactions too much. "I'll gather my things," I said. It would have ended there if he hadn't opened his mouth again. "Oh, and Oakley?" I turned. "Your bonus." A pause, like he was savoring the moment. "You're not getting one." This time, I couldn't hide the flicker in my expression. He saw it, and he smiled, slow and smug, before letting out a laugh so loud it echoed off the glass walls. "Come on," he scoffed. "What exactly would you be earning a bonus for? Paper processing, routine tasks? Evan told me half the stuff you do is just clicking buttons." Clicking buttons, 5 years of non-stop compliance deadlines, audits, certifications, and regulatory coordination, reduced to clicking buttons. "The bonus will remain with leadership," he said, leaning back like the matter was settled. "Consider it compensation for the training transition." Training transition? Evan hadn't even learned where the secure archives were located. I kept my voice steady, but inside something broke open. Not a wound. Something sharper. Something decisive. "Understood," I said, because giving him anything else would have felt like handing him the satisfaction he wanted. Bryce waved a hand dismissively, already turning to his computer. "I'll need your badge and laptop before you leave today," he said. 12 minutes would be ideal. I've got a call." I walked out with the same controlled pace I'd used walking in, but the humiliation clung to me like heat. The smirk, the laugh, the absolute certainty that I was irrelevant. He thought he'd ended something. He thought I'd just fade quietly out of frame. But as I crossed the floor, something settled inside me. Solid, calm, and unshakably clear. Bryce hadn't ended my story. He had started the one he would regret. I didn't let myself breathe until I reached my desk again. Not deeply, not fully, just enough to keep my hand steady as I pulled the box from the bottom drawer. The same cardboard box we all pretended we'd never need. I placed it beside my monitor and began filling it with the pieces of a life I'd built here. A small plant I somehow kept alive through nonstop deadlines, the pen set my sister bought me when I landed the job, a framed photo from a beach trip years ago. Ordinary things, but collecting them felt like packing up the last of my dignity. I forced myself to move slowly, not rushed or frantic. Bryce didn't deserve to see me crumble, even in imagination. My laptop shut down with a soft click, a sound I'd heard 1,000 times but never like this. I removed the access badge from around my neck and set it on the desk. That tiny plastic rectangle meant nothing now. What mattered was everything Bryce didn't understand. Because while he was busy patting himself on the back about efficiency, he hadn't considered what my role actually involved. He'd never read a compliance protocol, never sat across from a SATA officer explaining why a certification update was delayed, never been the one responsible when a single missing document threatened to halt an entire regional supply chain. Not once, but I had. Every week, every quarter, every year. And as I slipped my personal drive into my coat pocket, I knew something he didn't. None of the renewal documents existed anywhere Evan could find them. They weren't on the shared drive. They weren't in the generic archives. I kept everything organized in a private encrypted vault because the company's system was so chaotic that storing things anywhere else guaranteed disaster. I wasn't hiding anything. I simply worked in a way that made sense. But the truth was undeniable. If anyone besides me tried to assemble the renewal, they would drown in a maze they didn't understand. I opened my tablet again, just for confirmation. The renewal file was complete, hundreds of pages, perfectly formatted, verified with every updated requirement, 12 days before the deadline, not nearly enough time for someone new to start from zero. And even if they somehow found the documents, there was another problem. The SATA authorization list still had my name as the designated certifying officer. Without that authorization, any submission would be rejected before the first page was reviewed. Bryce hadn't removed me from the list. He didn't even know such a list existed. I took a deep breath, the first real one since he fired me, and let the truth settle. I wasn't sabotaging him. I wasn't stopping anything. I was simply leaving exactly as he insisted. The consequences belonged entirely to him. As I folded the last personal item into the box, Tara approached. She didn't speak, just handed me a small envelope, a handwritten resignation letter template she kept for emergencies. "You didn't deserve that," she whispered. I nodded once. No anger, no tears, just clarity. I walked toward the exit with my box in my arms, the October air pulling at my coat as the door shut behind me. He thought firing me proved I wasn't essential. He was about to discover what essential really meant. The parking lot felt colder than it should have for October, like the air itself was exhaling after watching what happened upstairs. I set the box in the passenger seat, closed the door gently, and simply sat there for a moment with both hands on the steering wheel. The humiliation still pulsed inside me, but beneath it something steadier had taken root. A quiet certainty that I wasn't the one who should be panicking. Not yet, anyway. I drove home on autopilot, passing familiar buildings without really seeing them. My mind kept circling the same truth. For the first time in 5 years, someone else would have to keep Helios Meridian compliant. And they had 12 days. 12 days to understand a process that had taken me years to refine. 12 days to decipher documentation written in regulatory language even seasoned officers struggled with. 12 days without the one person who actually knew what each step required. When I got home, the silence was jarring. No notifications, no late-night messages from warehouses overseas, no last-minute requests from Bryce pretending to be emergencies. I made myself a cup of tea, sat at my kitchen table, and stared out the window as the sky shifted from orange to dark blue. For the first time in years, I had nowhere I needed to be. No deadlines, no pressure, no one demanding explanations for problems they created. The peace was almost disorienting, but it didn't last long. My phone buzzed, an unknown number. I let it ring, it rang again, ignored, a third time. I muted the device and let the silence reclaim the room. If Bryce wanted something, he could leave a message. Instead, nothing came. That alone told me everything. People who believed they were in control avoided voicemails. They didn't want records of their fear. 2 hours later, the buzz came again, this time a voicemail notification. I didn't check it. I wasn't ready to hear whatever excuse or insult Bryce had decided to offer. Instead, I opened my laptop more out of habit than necessity and browsed through the headlines. Supply chain delays, market forecasts, nothing about Helios Meridian, nothing about SATA. Too early, too quiet. The next morning I woke up without an alarm for the first time in years. I made breakfast slowly, savoring the simple act of not rushing. Around noon, my phone buzzed again, another unknown number. I let it go, but when it buzzed a second time immediately after, something tightened in my chest. I answered. "Miss Vance?" The voice was crisp, formal, unmistakably professional. "This is Lena Markovich from the Southeast Asia Trade Authority." My shoulders straightened instinctively. "I hope I'm not calling it a bad time," she continued. "I noticed Helios Meridian hasn't initiated its annual certification renewal. This is unusual, given your history of early submissions." My breath steadied. "I'm no longer with the company," I said carefully. A long pause followed, one that felt weighted with understanding. "I see," she said quietly. "Well, please be aware the renewal deadline is October 24th. Submissions must come from the authorized officer on record." Another pause, which at this moment is still you. Her tone held no judgment, only fact, but the implication was loud enough to echo through my kitchen. I thanked her and hung up. The moment the call ended, I knew the silence was over. The storm had just begun. The first sign that everything was unraveling came early the next morning, when my phone lit up with 3 missed calls in under 10 minutes, all from numbers I didn't recognize. I ignored them and kept sipping my coffee, telling myself it wasn't my problem anymore. But when the 4th call came, then the 5th, both space seconds apart, I knew exactly who was behind them. Bryce never called directly. He sent minions, assistants, or cousins who didn't understand the difference between a customs declaration and a lunch order. I let the calls go unanswered and went about my morning, showering, opening windows, letting fresh air fill the small space of my apartment. My peace had been earned, and I wasn't giving it back for free. It wasn't until 9:43 a.m. that my phone finally rang with a name I recognized: Tara. I stared at the screen for several seconds before answering. "Oakley," she whispered. "You need to know. Evan submitted something to SATA." I blinked, stunned by the absurdity. "He what?" "He found some old certification packet on the shared drive and thought it was the right file," she said, her voice tight. "He uploaded it last night through the emergency portal. Bryce is losing it." My mouth went dry. The emergency portal was only for active crises, and even then, documentation had to be flawless. Evan might as well have handed SATA a confession that he had no idea what he was doing. "What did they submit?" I asked. "The 2021 safety certifications," she said. "The ones that got replaced twice." I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. "Thanks for letting me know," I murmured. She exhaled shakily. "Be careful, okay? He's panicking." An hour later, my phone rang again, this time with Bryce's name blazing across the screen. I let it ring twice before picking up. "Oakley," he began, and I could hear the strain in his voice, the cracks in his confidence. "We have a situation." "I'm sure you do," I replied, stirring sugar into my coffee. "The renewal," he snapped. "SATA rejected the submission. Evan says the documents were outdated, but we need you to tell us what went wrong." "I don't work there anymore," I reminded him, keeping my voice even. "You made that very clear." "Yes, well," Bryce said, words stumbling. "We may have underestimated the complexity." A bitter laugh almost escaped me. "You said it was clicking buttons." He didn't respond immediately. When he spoke again, his tone was brittle. "We need you, Oakley. Just walk us through what to do." "I can't," I said. "SATA requires the authorized officer to submit the renewal, and right now, that's still me." Silence. Heavy. Shocked. "But you're not an employee anymore," he said. "Exactly," I replied. "Which means you don't have anyone authorized to submit." I could hear him breathing hard, like someone realizing they were standing at the edge of a cliff. "What? What would it take?" he asked finally. I pretended to think, though I'd known the answer since the moment he laughed in my face. "A consulting agreement," I said. "Paid up front, non-refundable." "Fine," he said immediately, too quickly. "And how much?" I didn't soften. I didn't hesitate. 320,000. Bryce inhaled sharply. "That's insane." "Not compared to the 63 million in contracts you'll lose when your certification lapses," I said calmly. "Or the penalties you'll face when shipments get stopped at port." Another long, quiet moment followed. "We can negotiate," he offered weakly. We can't, I corrected him. That's the price. You're taking advantage of the situation. No, I said. I'm valuing my work at the rate you refuse to. He cursed under his breath, but the truth had pinned him. He had no leverage, no time, no expertise, no authorized officer, nothing. Send me the contract, I said. You have until the end of the day. After that, my availability is gone. It took only 4 hours for the signed contract to appear in my inbox, drafted by a lawyer who tried, unsuccessfully, to slip in a clause that would give the company grounds to sue me later. I deleted the clause, highlighted the correction, and sent it back without commentary. 10 minutes later, the money hit my account. $320,000, not for revenge, not for ego, for expertise. For 5 years of being indispensable to a man who believed I wasn't worth a bonus. I opened the renewal folder, the one ready months in advance, and whispered to myself, let's finish what he started. Once the funds cleared, the shift inside me was immediate. The humiliation Bryce had tried to stamp into me didn't vanish, but it no longer stung, it steadied me. I wasn't doing him a favor. I wasn't giving him grace. I was executing a contract he paid for at a rate that finally reflected the truth. I opened my laptop, navigated to the encrypted vault, and pulled up the renewal file I had prepared in September, long before Bryce ever thought about restructuring, long before Evan ever wandered into my office asking how to spell declaration. Everything was already organized. Updated documentation, safety validations, supply chain audits, manufacturing checklists, environmental clearances. The application was complete, precise, and polished because I had done what I always did, my job. I logged into the SATA portal using my credentials, the same credentials Bryce forgot I still controlled, and the system greeted me with its familiar blue interface. Evan's failed submission sat there like a warning label, flagged in red with words no company ever wanted to see. Deficient, requires immediate correction. I archived it with one click, not deleted, just tucked away where Bryce could revisit the consequences later if he ever forgot this lesson. Then I began uploading the real documents. The portal processed each attachment slowly, like it could sense the weight of what this submission meant. 3 years of improved safety validations, new supplier certifications from the Thai plant, updated compliance letters from the labs in Penang. It wasn't just paperwork. It was the backbone of an entire region's operations, and without it, Helios Meridian would go dark overseas. Every upload felt like reclaiming something. My voice, my value, my control. When everything was attached, checked, and cross-verified, I clicked Submit. The spinning icon lasted 15 seconds, 15 long seconds where my heart thumped with a strange mix of satisfaction and anticipation. Then the screen flashed green. Submission received initial review 48 hours. I exhaled. I took a screenshot and emailed it to Bryce exactly as promised. Cold, professional, no warmth he hadn't earned. His reply came 3 minutes later. Thank you. Please keep me updated. No arrogance, no smirking, just a man who finally understood he was not invincible. 2 days later, at 6:08 a.m., the approval email arrived. SATA had accepted the renewal with 0 corrections. No comments, no issues. Flawless. I forwarded the confirmation to Bryce with a single line. Your certification is approved. The phone rang seconds later. I answered out of courtesy, not obligation. Oakley, he breathed, sounding like someone pulled from a ledge. This is incredible. I don't know how to thank. You already did, I said, in writing and in full. He hesitated, then tried again. I'd like to talk about bringing you back. A new role, better pay. We can fix what happened. The audacity almost made me laugh. I don't think returning is in my best interest, I replied calmly, but I do wish you luck finding someone qualified. Before he could argue, I ended the call. I closed my email, closed the laptop, and for the first time in 5 years, it felt like I finally had a life of my own to return to. The morning after Bryce tried to offer me my job back, I woke up to sunlight instead of alarms. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the weight of someone else's crisis on my shoulders. My only responsibility was deciding what I wanted next. It felt strange, almost luxurious to open my email without dread. 3 new messages waited for me, none from Helios Meridian. All 3 were from companies I'd worked alongside during audits or cross-border checks. Word travels fast in compliance circles, especially when a major corporation nearly collapses and someone quietly saves it. One offer was for a short-term consulting contract, another for a project-based operations overhaul, and the last was a full-time position with a salary almost double what Bryce ever paid me. For the first time, I read job descriptions without feeling trapped. I wasn't choosing out of fear, I was choosing out of freedom. Later that afternoon, I checked my phone and saw a text from Tara. "I turned in my notice today, starting fresh somewhere else. Thank you for telling me when to run." I smiled, proud of her. Bryce had always burned through assistants, but Tara never deserved to be another casualty in his wake. I told her I was happy she got out. She wrote back instantly. "He's panicking again. Board wants answers about the consulting expense. They're tearing him apart." I set my phone down softly, not out of pity but closure. Some lessons are expensive, some are overdue, and some are earned the hard way. Like realizing the person you dismissed as replaceable was the one holding up an entire division. That evening, I went to my sister's house for dinner, something I used to skip because Bryce always expected weekend availability. My nephew showed me his new game, my sister insisted I take leftovers home, and the entire night felt like breathing clean air. When I returned to my apartment, I opened a blank document and began drafting my own consulting rate sheet, something I should have done years ago. At the top, I typed the number, $320,000. Then I wrote the line beneath it, Major Certification Renewal, Base Rate, Simple, Clear, Mine. As the year inched toward its end, I stood on my balcony with a cup of tea, watching the city lights flicker. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't humiliated. I wasn't defeated. I was free. Bryce taught me one thing without meaning to. Knowing your value isn't arrogance, it's survival. And now that I finally did, there was no going back. There's something this whole experience forced me to confront, something I think a lot of people, especially in America's work culture, understand too well. You can dedicate years of your life to a company, build systems no one else understands, hold entire operations together with invisible labor, and still be treated like you're replaceable the moment someone above you decides your quiet competence isn't shiny enough. I used to believe that hard work spoke for itself, but the truth is, hard work only speaks when people are willing to listen. And in places where ego, politics, or nepotism run the show, silence and humility are often mistaken for insignificance. What I learned is that knowing your value isn't arrogance, it's armor. It's the one thing no one can take from you unless you hand it over. Bryce thought firing me would simplify his life. Instead, it forced me to step back and realize how much I had allowed myself to accept less than I deserved. My revenge wasn't about destroying him. I didn't need to. Life handled that part. All I did was stop saving him for free, and sometimes that's enough. Sometimes forgiveness is self-liberation, but sometimes silence is the sharpest knife. You don't always need to slam doors or burn bridges. You just stop walking across them for people who never cared if you made it to the other side. The real lesson? Invest in yourself the way you've been investing in companies that would replace you by Tuesday. Build your skills. Keep your receipts. Know the rules of your industry better than the people who think they manage you. And never let anyone convince you that the unglamorous work you do is worthless, because the day you stop doing it, they'll learn what it was worth all along. How to get started today. Update your resume, even if you're not looking. Write down every responsibility you handle that no one else sees. Look up market salaries for your role and compare your reality. Identify one skill you can improve this month to increase your leverage. Practice saying no without apologizing. If this story hit home, tell me in the comments what lesson you see in it. And if you want more stories like this, share this video and subscribe so you don't miss the next one.